Hi and welcome to the Bramley Apple YouTube channel. Today we will speak about why I always make the black and white version for every picture I publish. In art school I was exposed to nude models from the age of 15, 16, and I was drawing these models, or we were making some clay modeling lessons to better understand the human anatomy. And so nude figure was even part of my final exams at the end of the art school. So it was quite an important part of my life, even back then. I've started taking pictures when I was 21 years old with this camera, that is the Yashica, and this is a very good camera, and I've chosen this camera because it was quite cheap to buy, not very expensive, shall we say, but at the same time it enabled you to mount the fantastic Zeiss lens. So potentially this camera was going to give you fantastic results, because at the time, if you had the proper film, you could put a good quality film in a crappy camera and have a good lens, and you could have fantastic results, because that was the best possible combination. Nowadays you have to have a very good sensor, a very good camera, and you have to have also very good lenses. But at that time this was my ideal combination: crappy camera, or should we say basic camera, and a fantastic lens. This is the 85 2.8 from Zeiss. The problem is that this was my dream at the time, but this was the reality. I did buy a second body, another camera. This was a Contax, but I always used crappy lens, because this was the Yashica one, and I always had this off-brand Tamron and Sigma. At the time they were really bad lenses, but unfortunately this was my equipment. So two bodies, and this was a Contax which was quite a good body, but the lenses unfortunately were always very cheap. In fact, the one that I've showed you now, the 85, this is a recent buy, and I'm buying them now. You see, this is made in Germany too, so it is really a good quality lens, but as I say, it was not the combination that I was using at the time. This is much later. You can find these now for very little money, and they're still capable of giving fantastic results, because from that time the real shall we say, what has become better are the zoom lens. Those have done quite a good development in the recent years. So the zoom lens, the wide angle lens, and all the functions that are linking the lens with the camera, so the autofocus and everything else. But the technology of the glass itself, for the normal lenses or the telephoto lenses, has not developed so much. So even the older lenses are capable of giving some very good results. And as soon as I bought this Yashica, I wanted to make some nude photography. I had a friend, a girlfriend at the time, that was willing to model for me, but I had some rules to follow that were very strict. So the picture had to be tasty, mostly implied nudes, and possibly the face had to be hidden all the time. So the most explicit picture that I had taken, but they had to be kept secret. And you can imagine that to send a color film to be developed and printed publicly, it was a bit out of the question. It was embarrassing and potentially catastrophic for our reputation. That was other times and other mentality. So I was then 21, now I'm 49, so it is nearly 30 years ago. So I had to learn how to process and print black and white myself. Color photography was impossible to develop and print at home, and the Polaroids were limited for pervert people only. Instead, I was trying to do something more artistic, so I really wanted to learn how to deal with the black and white. So this is how I developed my experience in black and white photography, and also the taste for the monochrome images in general. I was also toning some of my pictures with sepia or with other special chemicals. Also today I want to recreate the magic of black and white in my digital photography. In fact, I've also considered buying a Leica monochrome to step up considerably the quality of my black and white. But the problem is that I've managed to resist the temptation, at least so far, for the following reasons. My audience clearly prefer the color pictures. The color version of the pictures usually gets from 3 to 4 times more likes. Don't ask me why, but I suppose it is more similar to life, so they find it more appealing. So I need to make the color, and on top of that I can make a black and white version very easily for the few people that can actually appreciate it. So I have to do both. Most of the time I can't make up my mind which of the two I prefer, because also for me it is always a good match from color and black and white, and so I wouldn't know which to choose myself. So why should I make unhappy most of my followers and myself as well by doing only black and white? With the Leica M monochrome I would be limited just to the raw black and white and nothing else, and I would not be able to make the tonal value modifications in post-production by working on single color channels, and so I don't do it very frequently, but sometimes I'm doing it, and to have only the Leica monochrome would mean that I was not able to do that either. So for instance, if you have a great red background, you can play with it and you can make it lighter or you can make it darker just by playing with the red channel. That can be very interesting in some cases, but I use it very sparsely, very rarely. And if I bought the Leica monochrome, obviously, I would be limited to some lenses, like I am with the Leica M240 that we have seen in a previous video. I was telling you how to focus properly and quickly a lens on the rangefinder camera. You have to use normal to wide-angle focal lens. So for my nude and portrait photography, I'm currently using with the Leica M only the 50mm, and so also with the monochrome I would be limited to that focal length, which is a bit too little for me. I want to experiment with other focal lengths. And also, I don't know if I mentioned it, but the M monochrome is bloody expensive. It is a good experiment. I like the fact that Leica was bold enough, in fact they have been the only people bold enough to make a monochrome version of a camera, and that means that you can have the maximum performance from your sensor, but at the same time it is so highly priced that it is difficult to approach it. It is not a viable proposition for me. So even if I can't afford a dedicated sensor for black and white, I'm still trying to optimize my black and white approach to photography, even in the digital age, by buying some classic lenses that are helping the black and white in a great deal. Because nowadays the lenses tend to be optimized for sharpness because of the HD sensors and corner-to-corner performance. They are following market trends and creating the best possible lens, but only on paper. In reality, they are missing out on other qualities that are very important for fidelity and for the natural look of the images. So that classic look that you can see from film era, it is not only down to the film itself, but also to the type of lenses that we had at the time. So if you want to recreate at least part of that magic, you should use a classic lens. As I'm concentrated only on portraits and nude photography, which after all is an art form, I value the other parameters that were inside the classic lens. One, for example, will be the micro contrast, and that is much more valuable for me, particularly because it works wonders for my black and white. So I tend to use the classic lenses, and I also tend not to compensate for their defects, because as I want my models as natural as possible, I also want the rendering of my classic lens as natural as possible, with all the small defects that makes them so great. So that's why I make both versions of black and white and color in my pictures. I'm not committed enough to black and white to go all the way and buy the Leica monochrome, but I can't live without it. And I can't make up my mind which I prefer between color and black and white version of my pictures. Sometimes I prefer the black and white, and sometimes I prefer the color, and sometimes I just don't know. So I leave it to you, and I give you both the possibilities. I used to make, at the beginning of the Bramley Apple project, I used to make the black and white only for a limited quantity of pictures. Just the ones that were deserving the treatment, the ones that were more prone to take this treatment. But nowadays I have decided to make the black and white version for every picture. And I believe this is a great exercise, and it has become part of the Bramley Apple style. Thank you very much, and see you on the next episode.